What's up? This is Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff. On today's show, sounds like the Golden Knights have their starting goaltender. How long will it actually last? Plus, Pete Carroll says he's going to rebuild. Finally, will Mark Davis let him stick around? And did we see the Raiders offensive coordinator last night? Technically Correct is brought to you by Fragile Boxer Flower House. With nearly 2 decades of design experience, Fragile Boxer Flower House is known for creating bespoke couture floral installations for weddings, luxury events, and brand storytelling. Amanda, the owner and designer, leads every detail with a designer sensibility, offering a fully tailored boutique experience for each client. Find her on Instagram at Fragile Boxer. Shout out to Fragile Boxer Flower House for sponsoring the show this week. I really appreciate it. If you need some flowers for your event, check out Fragile Boxer. It's a great place to go find some flowers. So thank you to Fragile Boxer Flower House for sponsoring Technically Correct. Here we go. The Golden Knights have had an interesting goaltender season. Adin Hill gets hurt early on, something he's done for the majority of his career. They signed Carter Hart, and now they have Carter Hart and Akira Schmid as their two goalies. And what they're going to do the rest of the season is interesting. Assuming Adin Hill comes back, they might have their number one goalie just simply not playing for them right now. But I have thought that they have wanted Carter Hart to become that number one goalie. I have felt like that's been the organization's wish for a while now. So what does that actually mean going forward? We'll see how the short term works out, but in the long term, it's very interesting as well. What happens when Adin Hill comes back? But here's the short term part of this. Bruce Cassidy kind of named a starter over the weekend. He got asked after the game against Columbus about having did he have a 1A and 1B right now in Carter Hart and Akira Schmid? That's the way the question was phrased. Here is what Bruce Cassidy had to say.
It's a good problem to have no matter who we start. I think the guys are comfortable in front of them. So we talked about this earlier when Carter came into our lineup that we would have to get him up to speed. So is it 2 out of 3? If we have 4 in a week, I'm sure it would be more of a split. If we have 3, he's probably going to play 2 out of 3 as long as he can recover as well. So far, he's been able to do that.
So I went through, based on what Bruce Cassidy said, to figure out the numbers on playing 2 out of 3 games in a week or 3 out of 4 in a week. And if we start with last year, Adin Hill was healthy last year, and he played 61% of the Golden Knights games. So that's the number to kind of keep in mind for starting goalie workload for this team was 61% last year. So if Carter Hart played every week that they have 3 games, he plays 2, and every week that they have 4 games, he also plays 2. They also have a couple weeks where they only play 2, and I just did 1 of 2 for Carter Hart in those weeks. He would play 57% of those games. Now, if he played both games of the weeks where they only have 2 games, he would jump from 57 to 63%. So we're right around that 61% mark that Adin Hill got last year. At least that's the plan that Bruce Cassidy has laid out. The workload that he's looking for Carter Hart is almost identical to what Adin Hill got last season. So that is assuming that that this plan is in place for the rest of the year. Carter Hart's the number one goalie of the Golden Knights. Bruce Cassidy just told us that. He just told us that he wants to play Carter Hart as much as they played Adin Hill last year. It's been 2 weeks. He just got here, or I guess was just able to start playing. He's been around for a little bit longer, but they've already anointed him the starting goaltender. Cassidy hasn't come outright and said that's our number one, but based on his plan for Carter Hart's workload, he has said Carter Hart is this team's starting goalie. So here's the other question on it, though. How confident are you that Carter Hart's actually good? He's only played 4 games, so it's not a big sample size by any means. But in the 4 starts, his save percentage is .899, which is basically average. Save percentage is down in the NHL this year. His goals saved above average by natural stat trick is plus 0.15, which means he's saved .15 more goals than the average goalie. Not that much more. It's 4 games. I don't think any of us can say with any degree of confidence that Hart is good or bad because through 4 games, he's basically been an average goaltender. I can tell you through 17 games, a much bigger sample size, Kira Schmid's numbers are better, right? Just barely, to be clear, but better. And I think it's a little odd that Cassidy has already declared Hart's the goalie that's going to get the 60% share of this workload, right? When Schmidt has been fine and Hart has played 4 games and he's looked okay, nothing really wrong, but it just seems odd that they've already decided that. But I'm also curious how they're going to handle this when Aiden Hill comes back, because it's easier to sort of brush aside Akira Schmid. It's easier to say, we can make Akira Schmid the number 2, even if his numbers are fine, even if his numbers are better than Carter Hart's. But Aiden Hill is in year 1 of a 6-year contract, right? He's got a starter's contract. It's going to be a lot harder to brush him aside. So that's the interesting part, is assuming Aiden Hill comes back this year. Bruce Cassidy, I think, said he's week to week again yesterday, which he's been week to week, and we're in, I believe, month 2 of Aiden Hill being out. So, that should be month to month at this point. But I honestly don't know how they will handle it when Aiden Hill comes back. Do they go pure 50-50 split? Does he come back and immediately regain the 60% share of starts? Or does Carter Hart get that? Obviously how Carter Hart's playing in health I say all this and, the goalies are probably going to get hurt. It's not going to matter at the end of the day. So, but if you had a healthy Aiden Hill and a healthy Carter Hart at the same time, what do the Golden Knights want to do? Because it feels like they've wanted Carter Hart to be the starter, and Cassidy's effectively said that now. But what about the guy who's making $6.75 million? When he comes back, what does it look like? Now, on yesterday's show, was looking back at the road trip where the Golden Knights went 4-0-1, but at 5-on-5, they were actually outscored. Their expected goals were not great at 5-on-5, but their power play and penalty kill dominated. They're basically perfect on their power play and penalty kill and in overtime. So that's why they were able to go 4-0-1 without playing all that well at 5-on-5. But if you look at season-long numbers for the Golden Knights, it's actually pretty encouraging. Of publicly available stats, expected goals rate is probably the best one. It's sort of telling us how good a team actually is. It's sort of saying, hey, this is what's happened, and it's a pretty good predictive measure for the future. It's not perfect. Hockey's probably one of the sports that's pretty bad as far as like analytics that tell us how good teams actually are. Like baseball and basketball, very good at those numbers. Football, okay. Hockey seems a little behind. And I think it's part of the way the sport is played, right? But the Golden Knights are 7th this year in expected goals rate at 52.8%, right? And all of this is just 5-on-5, by the way. It is quite bunched up, which is, I think, the interesting part is if you go from 5, who's Washington, down to 13, which is Buffalo, those teams are separated by 1.8% on expected goals rate. So it's very bunched up there. Golden Knights have a couple of good games. They'll be right there in the top 5. They have a couple of bad games by expected goals, and they'll drop down to 13, right? But it's bunched up there, and the Golden Knights are so far 7th. If you look at some other numbers that are maybe a little less predictive than expected goals, some of these sort of feed into expected goals, but they're 11th in Corsi this year. They're 11th in scoring chance differential and 5th in high danger chance differential. I think all of this sort of the record the Golden Knights have, the fact that they don't lose in regulation very often, and that they are top 11 in most of these sort of advanced stats, including 7th and probably the most important one, like the Golden Knights are a good team. I don't think this is a great team. Watching them, they don't feel like a great team, but they don't seem too far away from that. And it's still the same point that I've been making for a while. this team should be good enough that we see a 15, a 20 game stretch where they play like one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the league and sort of have some assertion of, yep, we're a legitimate cup contender. We're here. This is how we can be. Don't have to do it for the entire year. We've talked about it on the show. They're in the Pacific. There's a good chance that they don't have to beat a good team to get to the conference finals. Like, that's a good sign. And so when they play well is going to be important. Again, I still think we need to see it. I don't think we can just have them sort of coast along as this above average team, get to the playoffs, and then, okay, now we're going to play like one of the best 4 teams in hockey. I think we need to see it in the regular season for an extended stretch. But I do think this team is good, just not quite at the level of, hey, I think they're going to win the Stanley Cup. One stat, though, that could lead to sort of that flip where the Golden Knights give us a 15 or 20 game stretch of being awesome. They're only 26th in shooting percentage at 5-on-5. At 5-on-5, they're at 8.4% shooting percentage. That's not very good. This team can't find the back of the net. Now, last year they were only 17th, so I don't think you shouldn't expect them to suddenly be top 10 in shooting percentage. I think roster makeup means they might not be too high in shooting percentage, but I do think that should be better. It'd be shocking if the Golden Knights were 26th at shooting percentage. Like that, they shouldn't be that low. So that might be an area where we see a 20-game stretch where the shooting percentage ticks up, and so that's leading to an extra goal every other game, and that's helping them win a lot more. That part of it, I think, is an area where just the way the puck bounces can go the Golden Knights' way a little bit more and not really have to change the way they play, and suddenly they're winning more or winning more in regulation, and they look a lot better doing it. One other area I wanted to talk about, because Bruce Cassidy talked to the media yesterday, and he called the win in Columbus a roster win. And he called it that and sort of mentioned that they got 2 goals from defensemen, had the tying and game-winning goals from defensemen in the third period. And he also talked about how in that game, but also on the road trip, how they evenly distributed the minutes, right? Because this 5-game road trip, he specifically said they didn't want to go and chase matchups for 5 games because the minutes would get skewed while everybody's gone on this road trip. And I went through to look at this, right? 5 games, how did they split up their minutes at 5-on-5? Hannafin at 5-on-5 led all defensemen with 19:04 per game played. So 19 minutes per game. Caden Korzak was the 5th most used defenseman at 16 and a half, 16:31. Ben Hutton's pretty down on the totem pole. He was at 13:51. So that's the split for the road trip. If you look over the course of the season, Hannafin actually played a few more seconds than usual. Korzak's did increase by about 30 seconds. Hutton's are actually identical. 13:51 is exactly what he's averaging for the whole season. So you didn't see much of a change with the minutes the defenseman actually played at 5-on-5. Similar story with the forwards. On the road trip, Barbashev was the most used forward at 5-on-5, played 14 minutes and 55 seconds. That is a little bit more than Barbashev plays during the whole season. Keegan Colasar was at 9:31 on the road trip. He played fewer minutes than he's normally averaging at 5-on-5 for this season. So the top end and the bottom end were actually further apart than we normally see for the forwards. And all of the first, second, and third lines were sort of between 13 and 15 minutes on the road trip. That's pretty similar to what we have seen throughout this season. That's about the range that they all play at 5-on-5. So the point here is that there was not a notable difference on this road trip into how the minutes got spread out at 5-on-5. It just did not exist. They were playing basically the same minutes. A few guys might have gone up between 10 and 20 seconds, and a few guys went down between 10 and 20 seconds. But for the most part, they didn't have some big change in minutes distribution. We didn't see, oh, the fourth line's getting huge minutes tonight. And I wonder, why would that stick out to Bruce Cassidy? Why would Bruce Cassidy have a team who didn't distribute their minutes differently, but then when talking about it, say, oh, yeah, we spread that out more. We had roster wins. If you look at expected goals rate, White Cloud and Korzak and Hutton, right? The three worst defensemen for the team. Their expected goals rate were all around 60%, which is very good, by the way. Expected goals rate, like basically getting it over 50% is good. You get over 55%, and that's very, very good, right? Colorado as a team is around 58% this year. So 60% when those three were on the ice, very good. Kolasar and Colton Sissons, the two least used forwards on the trip, their expected goals rate were 57 and 54%. Again, very good. And the Golden Knights' fourth line this year has had a very bad expected goals rate, gotten a lot of defensive zone faceoffs, which doesn't help that, but 57 and 54%. My guess here is that Bruce Cassidy kind of thinks that the bottom pair and the fourth line played more and the minutes were better and they got this roster win or these roster wins because simply those guys had more success when they were on the ice. Not that they were on the ice more, but when Kolasar was out there or when White Cloud was out there, the Golden Knights had the puck more. The Golden Knights had more shots, had more chances, as opposed to Cassidy watching them and thinking, uh-oh, they're going to give up a goal pretty soon. I better get them off the ice. I better stop playing them a little bit, right? I think it's just a matter of when he saw them play, they performed better. I think that might be as simple as it gets. Cassidy just felt better about their minutes than he normally has this year because they actually didn't play more minutes on this road trip at 5-on-5. So interesting way to sort of see if I'm right, to have a coach sort of influenced by the way the guys play as opposed to the amount of minutes that they actually played in the game. But good road trip for the Golden Knights, and that might be a big reason why. Their bottom line, bottom pair was actually productive, was not getting beat when they were out there on the ice. That might be a big reason why. I would say one other note on this when looking this up yesterday. Braden Bowman's expected goals rate on the road trip was like 35%, which is, again, about getting over 50% is bad, so under 50% is not good. 35%, I mean, there's not going to be a team this year that has an expected goals rate of 35%. So Bowman's, his analytics on this road trip, very, very bad. I didn't look any more into why that might have been the case, but Braden Bowman got off to a hot start when he got here, scoring goals. He's been put into pretty good situations with the lines that he has been on, but it was not overall that great of a road trip for Braden Bowman. So see what they do with Bowman and how they sort of handle him and the lines the rest of the way. But this has been Technically Correct. I say that like I'm about to end the show. That's not a good way to do that. We're about to go to Bischoff's Briefs. The show's not ending. But Technically Correct is brought to you by Fragile Boxer Flower House. With nearly 2 decades of design experience, Fragile Boxer Flower House is known for creating bespoke couture floral installations for weddings, luxury events, and brand storytelling. Amanda, the owner and designer, leads every detail with a designer's sensibility, offering a full tailored boutique experience for each client. Make sure you follow her on Instagram at Fragile Boxer. Huge shout out to Fragile Boxer for sponsoring the show. I love it. If you want to sponsor the show, email me at technicallycorrectvegas@gmail.com and we will make it happen. So again, thank you to Fragile Boxer Flower House. And if you want to sponsor Bischoff's Briefs, email me at technicallycorrectvegas@gmail.com. The NBA Cup final is tonight. It is the Spurs and the Knicks, and it is here in Vegas at T-Mobile Arena. But it might be the last time it's here in Vegas because Tim Bontemps of ESPN had a story yesterday where the NBA is looking to move the NBA Cup out of Las Vegas. Since the NBA Cup began a few years ago, the semifinals and the finals have been here at T-Mobile Arena. The NBA has already made the change that they are going to take the semifinals out of Vegas and they're going to have those played at the team's home arena. They've liked the home court atmosphere of the NBA Cup's games, so they're going to get more of those by moving the semifinals to home arenas. But when that was announced, it was still going to be the final as a neutral site and still the final in Vegas. But apparently it might not be in Vegas very long. From the story that ESPN had, the neutral site approach has lacked the energy and enthusiasm, at least to this point, the league initially hoped it would. And I think here's the problem. What the hell were the NBA's expectations for a neutral site environment here in Vegas? Because if you just think about, well, to use this year, right? It's the Knicks, the Magic, the Thunder, and the Spurs. Those were the teams that came here for the semifinal. Those 4 teams clinched their spot in the semifinals on Tuesday and Wednesday of last week. The semifinals were then on Saturday. So, how many people from San Antonio or Orlando or New York or Oklahoma City are booking a trip to Vegas with like 2 to 3 days notice for the NBA Cup semifinals? Not many, right? And I think everybody knows that. The NBA had to have known, hey, if we have the quarterfinals on a Tuesday and Wednesday and have the semifinals that weekend, you're not going to get that many fans traveling for those teams. So what you're relying on is people that live in Vegas to create some great atmosphere that the NBA apparently hasn't seen yet. But they're going to do it for teams that they don't necessarily watch, don't necessarily care for, right? And the prices, I went and looked yesterday. Cheapest ticket, you're in the upper deck behind a basket, $88. It's not horrible, but it's also more than like I want to pay to go. And I love the NBA, right? I like the NBA. I love to watch it. But I don't want to pay $88 to go sit in the upper deck for Spurs and Knicks, right? If you want to sit in the lower bowl, the cheapest seat in the lower bowl in one of the corners was $250, right? Like I'm definitely not paying $250 to go watch this game. So I just it doesn't seem like a feasible ticket price for a casual sports fan or even an NBA fan in Vegas. It just doesn't seem like that feasible of a ticket price. And so the idea that, hey, this neutral site game should have this good environment when the fans aren't going to be there from the teams that are actually in it. And then you're putting price points so high that a lot of sports fans, NBA fans might just say, nah, I'm good. Like, yeah, I'm probably going to watch it, but I'll just watch it on TV. I'm not going to necessarily spend $80 or $250 to go watch it. So I just don't think the way it's constructed is going to lead to any sort of atmosphere. One fix, you could leave it as a neutral site, but have the semifinals and the finals later, right? Play the quarterfinals in the first week of December and then have the semis and the finals like in January. I don't know, something like that, where it's like, oh, cool, we made that tournament semifinal. We can schedule to go to it with at least 2 months or a month and a half of notice. You might get more that way. Putting the semis at a local at the team sort of home arena will help as well. But I just don't think if they want to do neutral site for the final, anywhere's really going to change that unless you get lucky and you do the neutral site where one of the teams that's in the game happens to be. Just doesn't seem feasible. Also, in baseball, Ketel Marte doesn't want to play for the Oakland, Sacramento, Las Vegas A's. So Ken Rosenthal had a story at The Athletic. Ketel Marte is the Diamondback second baseman. If they were to trade him, it'd be one of the biggest moves of the offseason. But the detail of Ken Rosenthal's story is that Marte has a 5-team no-trade list. And those 5 teams are the Yankees, the Pirates, the Cardinals, the Giants, and the A's. I find it to be a weird list because, like, having the Yankees, you might say, oh, okay, he doesn't want to be in New York City, but he doesn't have the Mets on that list. He does clearly not like the Bay Area because he's got the Giants on there and the A's, who Sacramento now he might not like. And then Pittsburgh and St. Louis seem kind of random, right? Like what happened in those cities that Ketel Marte doesn't want to go there. So right now, like if you were a baseball player putting together your no trade list, I think saying no to Sacramento and no to the Tampa Bay Rays makes sense because there's stadium questions and like I can reject a trade to go play in a minor league ballpark in Sacramento for the next 2 years or whatever the hell Tampa's going to do. They've got new ownership there, right? Like that seems like a very easy one to put on there. But St. Louis and Pittsburgh, it seems kind of random. I do wish all no trade lists were public so that we could see which players really don't like specific teams or cities or whatever it was. It'd be great if we could have all of these public. But we got Ketel Martes and he doesn't want to play for the A's. In the world of college football, we've got a couple of these here to get through. First off, in the Mountain West, San Jose State's losing their best player. Their wide receiver, Danny Scudero, is going to hit the transfer portal. He led all of college football, not just the Mountain West, all of college football in receiving yards, averaging over 107 receiving yards per game with 10 touchdowns. He had 39% of San Jose State's receiving yards and 59% of their receiving touchdowns. And talked about it before, but this is the reality of being in a G6 conference. You might lose your best players. More likely than not to lose your best players. We're going to get into later in the week. UNLV's keeping some of their best players, at least for now, with Anthony Calandria and Jaden Thomas coming back. But you're going to lose good players. Like, it's going to happen, and it's happening to San Jose State, losing their best player to the transfer portal. Now, some schools that are actually keeping players around. First off, Arch Manning is returning to Texas. Arch Manning is not going to go into the NFL draft this year. He is going back to school. So, I don't know why, but if you wanted to draft Arch Manning in the first round, that's not going to happen. If you want to draft Arch Manning in any round, it's not going to happen because he's going back to school. You're also going to see Lenoris Sellers, the quarterback at South Carolina, go back to school. According to Pete Thamel, he's going back and is going to get a good revenue share or NIL deal from South Carolina, which I'm sure Arch Manning is as well. But looking at this from the Raiders' perspective, the quarterback class for the 2026 draft is looking to be very, very small, right? Sellers, I don't know exactly where Sellers would have been taken, but Sellers is the prospect that sort of has all the physical tools. He was really good in 2024, was not very good this year, but he's absolutely a player that you talk yourself into like, oh, yeah. He puts this all together. He's one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the league. He might not ever put it together. We see plenty of quarterbacks that never put it together, and they're just, not a starter after their rookie contract is up. But there are some tools there. But he's not going to be available. Arch Manning's not going to be available. You're going to have Fernando Mendoza. You might have Dante Moore. I don't think Dante Moore is officially declared or said he's coming back. Those are the projected first and second quarterbacks. And then after that, I mean, Ty Simpson maybe is number 3, but he also could go back to school. So there's not much in this draft, which means getting the number 1 pick is very, very important if you think you're going to need a quarterback. It also means that if you don't like Mendoza or you don't like Dante Moore, that there might not even be a guy you really feel good about drafting in round 2, 3, 4, or 5. Granted, I don't think you ever should take a guy in after round 1 that you want to start, but it just doesn't seem like a good quarterback class, or I should phrase it, a deep quarterback class, because if the Raiders get the number 1 pick and the number 1 quarterback is good, that's all they need. They don't need it to be a deep quarterback class. They just need one guy if they're picking number 1. If they're not picking number 1, they might need at least 2 or more to make this a class. But the other part, the sort of trend that we're seeing here, is something it's going to happen, because with NIL and the revenue sharing that's coming to college football, that changes the question for college players. Before, I would have said, and not everybody chose this way, but I would have said, I mean, go pro as soon as you can, right? You're playing a sport, play it for money. Start making money doing this. If somebody says, hey, Lenoris Sellers, Arch Manning, you could get drafted in the first round. You're probably not falling beyond round 2. Go. Like I'm saying, go get paid now. But with NIL and revenue sharing, especially at some of the best programs, you can make quite a bit of money. And you might make more than you were going to make on your rookie deal, depending on where you got drafted. So it changes the money side of it, where you can reasonably say, okay, I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to make some money this way and I'm going to go pro the following year. And in theory, still get the same level of rookie contract just a year later, but I got an extra, $3 million or whatever they're going to get paid from Texas or South Carolina. So that sort of changes that question, where in the past, I would have said, go as soon as you can. But that's not the case anymore, because you can get paid in college and get paid quite a bit of money above the table. Is that a phrase? Below the table is a phrase. Is there above the table? Why is it above board and below the table? Why do we change the table to a board in those sayings? That's stupid. But no Sellers, no Manning for the NFL draft. Also in college football, Florida's new head coach, John Summerall, is donating $100,000 to Tulane. So he's coaching Tulane in the college football playoff this weekend. And if they win, he's going to keep coaching them throughout the playoff. But he is Florida's next head coach. But he's donating $100,000. It's going to go to Tulane's NIL fund to help the new head coach out. Tulane put out this whole statement about how it's going to help the new head coach. Is $100,000 insulting? He's making 7.4 at Florida, 7.4 million at Florida on his new deal. Is $100,000 insulting? Because, like, what's Tulane getting for $100,000? I guess they might get their quarterback at the group of 5. But, like, that's first off, that's not holding off the money that Florida's going to offer to Tulane's players to leave Tulane and go to Florida. $100,000 is going to do nothing. Felt like that number was insulting from John Summerall. Let's get it together, John. Like, you can offer a bit more money. If you really want to help Tulane, give them some more money. You could do that. Wouldn't be that big of a deal. But this has been Bischoff's Briefs. Again, if you want to sponsor Bischoff's Briefs, TechnicallyCorrectVegas at gmail.com. So we've got a great listener, Chad, in Canada, who wanted to sponsor part of the show, but he wanted to give his thoughts of the day. Chad wanted me to say his thoughts of the day. But I had an idea, and this is going to be a trial run for it because plenty of you have asked for a Patreon. Start a Patreon probably at some point in the future, but this is one idea that I have where you basically give me some sort of prompt, and then I've got to go prove it. And this is a perfect example of what you could do. Chad's thought of the day: Mark Stone is a little overrated. And so in theory, Chad didn't ask for this. I'm taking Chad's thought of the day and running with it. But in theory, you could make me argue anything. That would be the point here. So here's a taste of it. Mark Stone is a little overrated. I think the word little is doing a lot of work there for Chad because I don't think Chad thinks Mark Stone is terrible, just maybe not as amazing as everybody else. So, did you know Mark Stone has just one season this year where he scored over 30 goals? And it was the season he got traded from Ottawa to Vegas. He only scored 5 goals for Vegas that year. His season high with the Golden Knights is 21. Like, we're getting all excited every time a guy who scores 21 goals a year is playing. What are we doing? Mark Stone also has only had one season where he's scored over 20 goals at 5-on-5. And again, it was the season where he got traded from Ottawa to Vegas. He's never had a season with the Golden Knights where he scored even 15 goals at 5-on-5. 15. He's also never had a season with Vegas where he put up 20 primary assists at 5-on-5, right? He didn't do that with Ottawa either. He's never had a year with 20 primary assists at 5-on-5. This is a guy who gets to inflate his point totals just because of the power play and nothing more than that. And by the way, his point totals aren't even that good. He can't even get to 70 points in a season. Not one time with the Golden Knights has Mark Stone gotten to 70 points, which, by the way, 70 is a fun number. He's never played in 70 games with Vegas, which is probably the most important point if we're trying to figure out how valuable Mark Stone is. He's never healthy, right? In the past, it was helpful because, we can put him on long-term IR, bring him back for the playoffs. We got a team that's over the salary cap. But now that loophole is closed. Mark Stone can no longer be the LTIR loophole for the Golden Knights, so that value is down. And then what I think is the most important way Mark Stone is overrated is the nickname. How many times do we have to hear the captain every time he does anything? It's the captain this, the captain that. And you can't say it normally. You have to say it like he's Batman or something. The captain, right? That's always, it's a terrible nickname. It's a sport full of terrible nicknames, but just calling him the captain, it's bad. They should call him Randy because a rolling stone gathers no moss. And if you've seen Mark Stone skate, he's so damn slow, he's definitely gathering moss. So there you go, Chad. If you want to argue with people about Mark Stone being a little overrated, there's something you can use. So you could use anything. Try to give me that prompt. Don't give it to me now because I'm going to make you guys pay for me to do this because I don't think Mark Stone is a little overrated. What's funny is when I was looking up stuff to do this, I was like, there's going to be some sort of like expected goal stats, some sort of analytic stats that I can just be like, yeah, here's a deep dive into this to be like Mark Stone's bad. Mark Stone's analytics are great every single year. Last year he was at like 52%, I think it was, for expected goals rate. That's like the worst since he's been in Vegas. Like this year it's at 61%. He's had multiple 60% expected goals rate season, which is insane. Like he doesn't put up the point totals, but when Mark Stone's on the ice, the Golden Knights are very, very good. So I don't think he's a little overrated. I actually think Mark Stone is the perfectly rated player. Like maybe in any sport, because nobody has the conversation that like, oh, Mark Stone is one of these top players in the league. I don't know who it was, but I just saw somebody on Twitter this week, or last week, I should say, that was like, I think Jack Eichel is one of the 3 best players in the league. And he might be. I'm not saying he's not, but nobody's doing that with Stone. Nobody's like, hey, how do we make the argument for Stone to be one of the top 3 or 5 players? I don't even think people would say Stone's a top 10 player in the league. Nobody talks about him like that. But we all talk about him as being good, just not in this sort of awesome way. We all know that he's good. And I think he's properly rated. I think of all of the players in like all of sports, Mark Stone might be the most accurately rated the way he's talked about. All right. I wanted to do some Raiders here because Pete Carroll talked to the media yesterday, and I actually think Pete Carroll gave us some interesting answers. But the first thing I want to do here, I got a clip here of Pete Carroll's talking to the media yesterday, and he got asked 3 questions in a row. And normally at press conferences for everything, sports, not sports, whatever it is, normally there are reporters that all have their own stories and all have their own questions to ask, and they, you jump from topic to topic. Very rarely do you get a sequence of questions that are good follow-ups to the previous question and answer. It just doesn't happen because of the reality of how press conferences work and how reporters work. But yesterday, Pete Carroll got asked a sequence of questions that were great follow-ups. I mean, it was like, yeah, that is exactly the next question that he should be asked based on the answer that he gave. And I loved it because I love the media more than most of you. I just enjoyed that part of it. But I also liked it just because it got Pete Carroll to have to answer questions that are like, oh, you just said this. Well, what about it? So here, I want you to listen to these. It's 3 questions and answers from Pete Carroll. We're going to talk about both the answers and the questions here in just a minute. But here is Pete Carroll yesterday talking to the media.
Final 3 weeks of the season, do you feel like you're coaching for your job? Like, I wonder, how do you kind of like?
No, I don't feel like that at all. I really don't. I don't. I'm well beyond that. I don't feel like that.
Would you be willing to oversee a rebuild?
Well, it's looking like that's what's necessary. We need to keep working to get better, and that's in all areas, all aspects of what we're doing. I came in here thinking that we were going to turn it right away. I really did, and anticipated doing that, and that's not what's taking place, unfortunately.
Was that just an evaluation of the talent was just off with not being able to?
I blindly optimistic as I am, I thought we would come in here and we'd have a big factor on this club, and we would be able to, find success that we would be proud of. And right now it doesn't feel like that.
So Pete Carroll gets asked, are you coaching for your job? Valid question. They're 2-12. Is Pete Carroll coming back? We've talked about it on this show. Valid question. And Pete Carroll says, don't feel like there's pressure on me to coach for my job. So the great follow-up, and I apologize, I don't know who asked the first question, but I know there's Mark Anderson who asked the second question. The great follow-up is like, you're not coaching for your job, so if you think you're coming back, are you going to coach a team that's rebuilding? Because all we heard from Pete Carroll was 10 wins, 10 wins, 10 wins. Phenomenal follow-up question right there of, hey, are you going to oversee a rebuild? And then Pete Carroll says, it looks like that's going to have to be the case, and then starts telling us that he thought they were going to turn it around and he thought they were going to be good. Coach says when they're 2-12, I thought we were going to be good. Phenomenal third question there. And that's Q from Raider Nation Radio, my old boss, saying basically like, well, you thought you were going to be good, but you're 2-12 now. So did you screw up evaluating the talent on the roster? How bad did you get that? Right? And that's where Pete Carroll actually squirmed a little bit because he didn't know exactly what to say other than, oh, I'm overly optimistic. Phenomenal sequences of questions that I wish happened more in press conferences because you would get good answers. You would actually get coaches or players or whoever it is that have to answer questions in sequence and not just, oh, brush off that topic because the next person wanted to ask something about Max Crosby's motor, which, by the way, if you follow the Raiders on social media, all the video stuff that they put out, that was all over yesterday was Max Crosby works so hard. They're 2-12. Like, let's calm down on the whole Max Crosby works hard thing. But on the answers Pete Carroll gave, well, I'll stop gushing about the media for you. Pete Carroll gets asked, you coaching for your job? And he says no, that he basically doesn't feel that pressure. I don't think Pete Carroll would come out and say he's coaching for his job. Most coaches would not come out and say that. So I don't find his answer to be too surprising. It is in reality a question that Mark Davis should be answering, but Mark Davis doesn't do press conferences 3 times a week with the media. He'll do one at some point here at the end of the season, I would assume. But if Mark Davis was doing it, I'm sure he'd get asked, but it's only Pete Carroll right now. But is Mark Davis considering firing Pete Carroll after one season? Like, he's got to consider it. I should say that. They're 2-12. I wouldn't let him coach next season, but I don't know what Mark Davis actually thinks. And the other part of this is that it is Pete Carroll. Like, there is some name recognition there. It's probably a little harder to run him out the door than, a coach that doesn't have any sort of name power or name recognition. You might even want to say, hey, Pete, we're probably going to fire you. Do you want to retire and sort of take the way out here? So, but that's a Mark Davis question that Pete Carroll did answer, but isn't necessarily all that insightful. But the next 2 questions, right? First time that I've heard Pete Carroll, at least that I can remember, saying that he would rebuild. Forced into it by the record, I guess. And even his answer was sort of hesitantly saying like, well, that's what it looks like. But it's the first time that Pete Carroll's really said, oh, yeah, a rebuild might actually happen. Remember, they were 2-8 and refusing to play Caleb Rogers. They were 2-8 and refusing to play Jack Besh. So we knew this was a bad team, and he was still not doing any of the rebuild steps. It was still play the veterans, win as many games as we can right now. The other part of that, and again, Mark Davis not doing weekly press conferences mean you can't ask him, but is Mark Davis on board with this? Because that has been the biggest problem with the Raiders since they moved to Vegas. Mark Davis doesn't want to rebuild. He wants to go for it. No matter what, no matter how bad the team is, Mark Davis wants to go for it. He doesn't want to lose a lot. They're still losing a lot. But will Mark Davis accept a rebuild? Will he accept hey, we're not going to be good in 2026. We need to build for 2027, 2028, whatever it is. So again, a question for Mark Davis that I'd be curious to see, because Pete Carroll, maybe he doesn't actually want to, but at least said out loud, looks like we got to rebuild. The last question there, though, I think is very important for the reality that is the Raiders. Did Pete Carroll and John Spytek and Tom Brady, did they blow the talent evaluation this offseason? Because they thought they were going to win right away. Pete Carroll thought they were going to win 10 games. Pete Carroll thought they were going to be a playoff level team. And they're 2-12, right? Like, how bad were you at evaluating your roster and knowing how good your roster was to go 2-12 with a team that you thought was playoff level, was playoff good? Because they're not even close to playoff good. I don't know if you've watched them play, but it's not very good. How bad did you evaluate this team? Because the Raiders need to rebuild. I've been saying that for a long time, years, right? The Raiders need to rebuild. It sounds like the coach might actually be on board to do it. Let's pretend like the owner, Mark Davis, is okay to do it too. Do you want Brady, Spytek, and Carroll doing it? Do you want the guys that thought this was a playoff team to do the rebuild? They believed Geno Smith was the answer. They believed the offensive line was good enough. They believed this secondary and linebacking core was fine. And they got all of that wrong. All of those talent assessments were off. Can you trust them to be in charge of a rebuild? Because I don't know if you can. The whole point of the rebuild is to get young talent to help you for the future. Can this group identify talent? Because based on one offseason, it sure looks like they can't. it looks like they can't do it. All right, wanted to end the show with a hypothetical for you. Dolphins got eliminated from the playoffs on Monday night, losing to the Steelers. Mike McDaniel, the head coach there, probably getting fired. So the hypothetical I have for you, Raiders keep Pete Carroll. They decide not to fire Pete Carroll. How would you feel as Mike McDaniel as an offensive coordinator, right? How good would that be in your mind? Because I feel like it could go either way. And the optimistic side is that as a head coach in Miami, they had his first year, they were, I think, 11th in like yards and 7th in points. Or I have that backwards, 11th in points and 7th in yards. They were a good offense his first year in Miami. His second year in Miami, they were first in points and second in yards. They had an unbelievable offense his second year in Miami and did it with a bad quarterback, right? Did it with Tua. Tua looked awesome that year. We've got proof that McDaniel can make a bad quarterback look good, that he can have an explosive offense without a great quarterback. So that's the type of offensive coordinator that I want, if not head coach, is who's the guy that calls plays that can make the terrible quarterback look average or great, or the average quarterback look great. That's what I'm looking for. And we've seen that out of Mike McDaniel, but the last 2 years have been terrible. They have not been good offensively. So is that more of the reality? Is this a case of a guy who's he's just not a head coach, but he can put together a good offense? I know it didn't look good last night, but the Dolphins' running game has been phenomenal in the second half of the season. Would that be a good offensive coordinator hire? I think it would be an interesting one. I would like to see it. I don't think it would be bad because of the evidence that we do have. So we might have seen the new offensive coordinator last night, depending on what happens for both the Dolphins and the Raiders this offseason. But this has been Technically Correct. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, if you want to get in contact with me for any ideas, any sort of sponsorship, it's technicallycorrectvegas@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in.